So let's dig into the unit titles first, if we can take a closer look at that. So when you see something like proportional relationships or integers, those are traditional units or modules or topics in many 7th grade math curriculum. But at the same time, it's all about the colon, right? So unit 1, it's proportional relationships, conserve or splurge, or integers, analyze impact in environmental challenges. How did you actually start to connect the dots between something that is typical and classical paired with something that potentially sort of makes you want to lean in and read a little bit more?
You picked the 2 units that I am most proud of, the ones that I really feel like tell the story of what the unit is and what the unit could be. So thanks for choosing those 2. I really think that curriculum needs to be something that is user-friendly and also audience-friendly. So I wanted to keep in mind that this document is something that could be used by teachers to help guide their story and their planning, but it could also be something that is available to the community or students, so that more conversations can happen about what's happening in mathematics and in the class. So in order to think about that, I wanted to make sure that the content was available. This is secondary math. I like the student-centered approach, but we also need to keep a balance between our students and what we are teaching. So that's part of why I wanted to keep the core content piece, the core concept, as part of the unit. So I wanted the unit number to be there as part of being able to see how the unit transcends and connects to the future units, but also keep the content piece there, and then keep a piece that captures the excitement and the captivation, like captivate our audience. So the Conserver Splurge is probably my favorite title.
Yeah. Well, and again, when you're starting to think about that, you're also really leaning into the application really clearly in that title as well. So you're giving a nod to the kinds of authentic problems and challenges that students are going to be experiencing within the content of that math unit. So it's a beautiful pairing to actually help tell that story. So can you give us a closer look at the idea of the images? What was the inspiration for those? Did you do the images and then start to mess around with the focus of the story or the titles? So chicken and egg, which one sort of came first, and how did it inform the other pieces?
I thought that this was a misconception I had. I thought that the picture and finding the image that would capture the story would be the easiest part, and it wasn't. And I'm still not, with some of them, I'm still not quite satisfied. This is still a draft. I definitely wrote the story first, and it was clear to me that was, for me, what was best. I wanted to capture the content as well as how students were relating the content to the real world and understanding that the content is relevant to them. So I needed to figure out what through line or which way I was going to capture that real life within the story part, the focus story. And then from there is when I picked up the theme and tried to figure out what image, through lots and lots of searching, would fit that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
so.
was it.
No, I think it's important because many people find that the idea of the image is probably easier, but as you can continue to see, that finding the appropriate image to help tell that story actually is a heck of a lot more complex than we might realize. And again, I so much appreciate the visual iconography. I adore like the faucet with the drip, with the environmental aspect associated with that, because that actually starts to tell a story. So the notion of it can be abstract and actually compelling at the same time, especially for a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, is really intriguing. Whereas when you start to see the dollars with the dice, that also feels a little more literal, but at the same time also continues to clarify the kinds of things that you're continuing to pay attention to and focus on. So it's really a dance between what image really does continue to draw that individual in, that the curriculum storyboard is for, specifically students and potentially their families. So when you started to mess around and draft and potentially redraft the focus of the story, I know we had a couple of conversations in that particular area. What were the kinds of things that you were paying attention to in terms of challenges with language?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I think one of the greatest challenges wasn't necessarily related to the language, but was related to the length. What I started with was way too long, and some of the language definitely would not have been friendly to a 12-year-old, and would have been more friendly to someone that has a background in mathematics. So really trying to phrase and rephrase things so that they were student friendly. But I also think that it's important to use appropriate vocabulary words, particularly at this age. So it was somewhat like the picture in that it was a dance. It was a dance here as well. I want the vocabulary words, but I also want to make sure that it is readable and understandable so that students can take a stance of inquiry and be able to ask questions to be able to drive their interest based on what's written here.
Yeah. And, I also appreciate not only the clarity of the focus of the story for each unit, but also the bridging that you typically did. So if we're leaning into unit 3, that second sentence is, we circle back to our initial understandings of integers from 6th grade. So you're not only looping potentially to a previous unit, you can also loop back into a previous grade level to continue to pull that thinking and that skill set along. It also starts to show very clearly that the power of actually having curriculum storyboards across multiple grade levels continue to help that learning to become more sticky. So I think that's another beautiful example of both, in this case, a vertical pulling in, as opposed to just simply being a horizontal connection to a previous unit.